Have you ever imagined having to make the most brutal choice of your life? The kind where reason falls silent and hope becomes an invisible thread at the edge of existence. This video isn't just a story, it's an invitation to feel the despair of a mother who, for love, was pushed beyond everything she knew. A visceral journey through pain, loss, and unbreakable human strength. Prepare to be moved. Where are you watching us from? Have you ever felt the despair of a point of no return choice? Or do you know someone who dared to go beyond the limit? Share your perspective in the comments and help us bring this voice to those who need to hear it. If this story touches you, leave a like to strengthen this connection. And if you believe narratives like this deserve to be told, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next chapters of this journey. This video is a work of fiction inspired by real accounts. We do not encourage illegal immigration. Many people have lost their lives attempting to cross the border. Our goal is to generate empathy, reflection, and awareness about the realities faced by those seeking a better future. We support legal and safe immigration. For reliable information, please refer to the QR code or link in the description. The smell of burnt beans hung heavy in the kitchen, the last reminder of a routine that no longer made sense. Camila Reyes rushed to take the pot off the stove, but her eyes, tear-filled and fixed, were on something else, the silver inhaler on the dresser in the next room. Each dry, incessant cough from her little Valeria echoed through the house like a distant drum, a somber rhythm that made the floor vibrate beneath her feet. With every gasping breath from the child, Camila's own chest tightened, stealing her air. She wasn't a doctor, she wasn't a saint, she was just a mother who'd traded sleep for endless vigils, who counted drops of antibiotic with the same desperate precision used to count the beats of a threatened heart, tasting the bitter tang of helplessness with each new dawn. Valeria, a tiny being of 7, had been born with stolen breath. Her severe lung deficiency had turned air, once an invisible ally, into her greatest enemy. In recent months, the atmosphere at home felt dense, heavy, oxygen a scarce commodity. The doctor's words, spoken in hushed tones, almost a secret between truth and fear, were a constant echo. The public hospital could no longer offer advanced treatments. The last hope, an experimental medicine, did exist, but it was on the other side of the border in the United States, and the cost, more than the small house Camila lived in, a home that had sheltered 3 generations of her family, where people were born and died without ever dreaming of crossing any divide. The thought of selling what little remained of her family's inheritance, the worn furniture, the cherished keepsakes, felt like a betrayal. But with each of Valeria's crises, the voice of reason screamed louder than sentiment. Camila's fingers squeezed the small blue necklace that hung around her neck. Valeria had made it with the innocence of a 7-year-old, using frayed fabric scraps and crooked sewing thread. "It's so you remember me when you're tired," the girl had said, and the phrase now burned in Camila's memory like an ember, a constant reminder of the little life depending on her. Valeria didn't know about the plan consuming her mother. She didn't see the silent tears Camila drowned in her pillow each night. Much less did she imagine the clandestine visits to a woman in the outskirts, Donna Clary, a name whispered among the desperate, known for arranging departures. A figure of somber hope on the edge of the underworld. Camila felt like a ghost, moving through shadows, hiding her pain and resolve, building an invisible bridge between love and desperation. Camila tried every legal avenue. She called distant relatives, their voices fading into vague excuses and empty regrets. She pleaded with NGOs, whose promises dissolved into endless bureaucracy and paperwork that led nowhere. She cried on radio shows, her choked voice meeting the echo of silence. The answer, cold and repetitive, was always the same: "I'm sorry." But no one was truly sorry. No one held Valeria in their arms, witnessing her small child's body tremble from lack of air, her lips tinged blue from the effort. No one saw the girl's mute gaze pleading for help, incomprehension etched on her face. Why had the world seemingly turned its back? That general indifference, the cold, impersonal bureaucracy, was the final straw. A shock of reality that pulverized any remaining faith in a system that seemed designed not for the desperate, but for those who already had resources. There was no more time. Valeria's biological clock beat louder than the city's. Faith in the system had crumbled to dust. All that remained was a crumpled map of the arid Sonora desert, its lines faded from handling, and a name, Elias, the coyote. The man with worn boots and hard eyes, who spoke few words, a specter of trust for someone who had nothing left to lose. His promise was a less monitored route, a path in the shadows to what seemed to be the only chance, the last desperate gamble in a cruel game where her daughter's life was the stake. Camila caught the strong smell of gasoline from somewhere, mixed with the scent of dry earth. That morning, Camila's gestures as she prepared Valeria's coffee were filled with a painful tenderness, each touch a last caress. A rehearsed goodbye that she refused to utter aloud. She dressed the girl in her little lilac floral dress, its colors faded with time, but which Valeria loved so much. She combed her fine hair, singing softly the song her own mother used to sing to her in childhood, an old melody that felt like a final note to a life she wasn't sure she'd ever find again. She smelled the sweet scent of her daughter's hair, felt the soft texture of her skin, trying to engrave every detail, every sensation, for a memory that would have to last an uncertain eternity. "Why are you singing, Mommy?" Valeria asked, her voice frail but still curious. "So your heart doesn't forget my voice, my love. So it stays tucked away there, very strong." Camila could barely form the words, her throat tightening. Valeria smiled, a brief glimpse of light between her coughs. An innocent smile that didn't grasp the gravity of that moment, the farewell unfolding in every fiber of her mother. She didn't know, and Camila, crushed by the weight of her decision, by the terror of what was to come, couldn't bring herself to tell her. She couldn't bear to see fear bloom in those innocent eyes, her innocence fading before the imminent separation, a cruel blow to childlike purity. She entrusted her daughter to the care of their neighbor, Eleanor, the kind old woman with deep wrinkles, making a hasty excuse about important hospital visits. She felt Elena's hands on her back, a comfort she didn't deserve, a kindness that hurt her knowing the lies she told. But as she closed the door, the dry thud of the wood, Camila knew. She knew she wasn't just leaving her daughter behind. She was leaving a part of herself, perhaps her very soul, in a sacrifice with no guarantee of redemption. A cold emptiness settled in her stomach, a premonition of danger, of solitude. At the street corner, her heavy backpack chafing her skin, and the blue necklace vibrating in the wind like an erratic heartbeat, Camila hesitated. Instinct screamed to turn back, to hug Valeria one last time, to undo that choice. She looked back at Valeria's familiar bedroom window. The curtain fluttered gently in the morning breeze, a final wave, as if the entire house, the memories within it, were bidding a silent farewell. And it was there, in that moment of parting, with the bitter taste of regret and the urgency of hope pulsing in her veins, that reason surrendered to the purest instinct of survival and maternal love, a silent roar. She crossed the street, and with her, she crossed the invisible line where love turns into desperation, where fear transforms into courage, and where the impossible becomes the only choice. If the weight of this choice has already moved you, feel free to leave a heart in the comments. It's a silent but powerful gesture of solidarity for those who have lived or are living similar dilemmas. The first night was nothing but dust and cutting silence, a darkness so dense it seemed to absorb any shred of hope, any sound but the arid wind. Camila Reyes walked among unknown figures, wandering shadows, each carrying their own invisible despair, yet palpable in their veiled glances, in their bent bodies. The group was small. 3 men, 2 women, 1 teenager, all driven by a common impulse, a thin thread of hope amidst the desolate vastness. They followed the pace set by Elias the coyote, whose worn boots kicked up fine, reddish dust with every step, and whose hard, impenetrable gaze seemed to see beyond their tired bodies, perhaps into their wounded souls, the broken dreams that urged them onward. He guided them like one guides shadows, no names spoken, no stories told, no guaranteed future, just a vague, distant goal. Camila's breathing was already short, ragged, a hoarse whisper, and the air entering her lungs felt rough, as harsh as the sand that covered everything. Camila, with each heavy step, felt Valeria's photo, folded and worn in her shirt pocket, like a talisman heavier than 1,000 stones, a constant and painful presence. Guilt, acidic and corrosive, burned in her chest, a fire consuming her insides with every memory of her daughter, her cough, her smile. But the way back had been sealed, and the only path was forward, even if every muscle in her body screamed for a pause. The thin air already weighed on her lungs like lead, forcing a conscious effort to breathe, and the heat rising from the arid earth was a punishment, a dense vapor that seemed to hold back her breath, making her fight for every gulp of oxygen, feeling her mouth dry and cracked. The relentless sun showed no mercy to exposed skin, burning it into painful blisters, transforming her face into a mask of pain and exhaustion. The smell of sweat and dust mixed with a strange metallic scent, perhaps the blood from her blisters. And time, a cruel tyrant, seemed to have frozen in that infinite aridity, stretching every second to the limit of physical and mental exhaustion. The first 2 days were a succession of minor horrors that compounded into continuous, exhausting torment. Thirst, a sharp blade, tore at her throat, turning each sip of warm, rationed water into an act of supplication, a minimal and temporary relief that barely moistened her mouth and cracked lips. Leaving a metallic taste of rust, bloody blisters erupted on her feet, raw and aching with every friction against the sand and sharp stones, and each step was a searing agony. The fine desert dust entered her eyes, nose, and mouth, turning the act of breathing into a test of endurance. Meanwhile, the backpack, once a promise of provisions, had become a burden, a heavy cross on her already hunched shoulders, a weight that seemed to pull her to the ground. But worst of all, the most oppressive and constant sensation was fear. A fear that never slept, that crawled beneath her skin like an insect, crushing any glimmer of hope. The fear of being caught, of being left behind, of dying there where not even vultures left a trace, where the earth held secrets of lost lives and untold stories. Valeria's image was a constant screen in Camila's mind, present in every drop of sweat that dripped from her eyelashes, salting her mouth. It was her anchor, her engine. Sometimes she heard her daughter's call in the middle of the night, the suffocating cough, the desperate struggle to breathe, feeling her daughter's pain in her own flesh, an empathy that transcended distance. These visions were the force that propelled her, pure adrenaline that kept her going, even when her legs trembled uncontrollably, when her body screamed for surrender, when her mind threatened to dissociate, floating out of that brutal reality, a defense mechanism against the unbearable. In a dark, cold dawn, the group was forced to hide. Over 5 hours motionless, crammed among thorny bushes that scratched exposed skin, creating small wounds. Their faces pressed into the warm, dusty earth, smelling the mineral scent of the soil and the strong odor of animal urine after spotting the unmistakable blue glow of a patrol vehicle in the distance. Camilla's heart beat wildly, a drum in her chest. Each beat an amplified sound in the silence. She was petrified, breathing shallowly, afraid even to inhale the dust. A scorpion crawled across her thigh, and she didn't even move, too terrified to react, lest any movement, no matter how small, betray her. The only thing moving inside her was the memory of Valeria's voice, childlike and urgent. "Mommy, come back soon." The phrase anchored her to life, to reality, to a purpose beyond immediate pain. During that crossing, reality dissolved into a haze of deprivation and near madness. Night felt like day, and day, an endless punishment, an interminable cycle of scorching heat and searing pain. Water was rationed with desperation, each sip divided like an inheritance of survival, a precious liquid that barely moistened her mouth and cracked lips, leaving a metallic, rusty taste. One of the men, Ramon, began to hallucinate with a high fever. He was injured, barely able to move, and no one had anything to offer but pitying glances and the fear of being the next to fall. Camila helped him walk for hours, his arm draped over his swaying body, feeling the feverish heat radiating from him, his sticky skin. The smell of sweat and illness was strong. Until Elias, with his dry, emotionless voice, like someone dealing with cattle, ordered them to leave him behind. "He's going to die anyway," the coyote said, his voice cold as steel, devoid of any empathy, any humanity. Camila stopped, her body paralyzed by a moral shock that split her in two. She looked at Ramon, who trembled on the ground like a helpless child. His eyes glazed, silently begging for help in a look no one else could bear to meet. "He can't stay," she murmured, her voice choked, a thin thread of her own humanity stretched to its limit. "And you want to die with him?" Elias retorted, his gaze pitiless, the cruel logic of survival dictating a death sentence. She hesitated, a moment of moral terror that tore her apart, her mind in conflict. Silent tears streamed down her dusty face, mixing with dirt and sweat, salting her lips, and then, with a whispered apology that was lost in the arid desert wind, a burden of guilt to add to the others she carried, she walked on, one step after another, feeling that each meter forward cost her a piece of her own soul, a price she didn't know if she could pay, but one that was inevitable. On the third night, the desert showed its absolute, relentless cruelty. Cutting winds whipped at their exhausted bodies. The cold penetrated their bones, causing uncontrollable shivers. Distant sounds, howls or moans, seemed to be from invisible beasts or lost souls in the vastness, echoing in her mind. Camila hugged herself, feeling the burning of solitude, the emptiness of having left everything behind, and murmured Valeria's song, the only melody left to keep her from going mad, to keep her anchored in reality, however painful it was. The smell of damp earth mixed with the scent of fear. In the middle of the darkness, she thought of turning back, of screaming, of simply letting herself fall and giving up everything. The idea of death at that moment didn't seem as terrifying as the continuation of that agony. But then, an image pulled her from her stupor, a small miracle, a sign of life. She found a flowering cactus, just one. In the midst of so much aridity, that desolate landscape of death and dust, the rough, cold texture of the sand, that small yellow flower, a vibrant point of life, seemed to open before her like a sign, a reminder that life could still sprout in the most improbable of places. Even in her parched soul, she knelt there on the cold ground, feeling the friction of the soil against her knees and cracked palms, and she wept. She wept, embracing the silence of the world, feeling hope sprout in the midst of devastation, a seed of resilience growing against all odds. And she made a promise, firm and unwavering, whispered to the arid wind, "I won't die here, for her, for us. I will make it, I promise." By the sixth day, her strength was fragmented, scattered pieces of a will that stubbornly refused to break. But the exhaustion was almost palpable, heavy as a blanket. Elias, the coyote, said they were close, but no one knew what close meant. A day? 2? Another endless hell? Every time he spoke, hope mixed with despair, a bitter blend of expectation and frustration. Camila felt her eyes burn, her vision blurred by dehydration, her heart slowing to weak, irregular beats, threatening to give out. She began to forget the sound of her daughter's voice, the contours of her face, the warmth of her embrace. She began to forget herself, who she was before that journey, before that pain. But still, she kept going. With her feet wounded and swollen, each step feeling like a deep cut, her face burned by the relentless sun, her skin tight and rough, and her soul emptied, she still took steps. Because deep down, a certainty propelled her, an inner voice that screamed louder than the pain. Dying trying was still better than watching her daughter die without trying anything at all. Life's roads are many, and some are unimaginable. If you know, or have lived, a journey of crossing marked by challenges, share your testimony with respect and empathy in the comments. Your story can be a light for others. On the 8th day, a mirage materialized in the distance, challenging exhaustion and mental confusion. What appeared to be fences and lights, a subtle glow, a faint promise on the horizon, blurred by dust and extreme fatigue, a beacon of hope that seemed too unreal to be true. Elias signaled with his arm, a hurried, almost frantic gesture, for the group to quicken their pace. 2 more hours, he whispered, his voice softer than usual, yet laden with contained urgency. After that, it's every man for himself. Camila no longer had a sense of time. Deprivation and fatigue had distorted every minute, every hour, turning them into an endless eternity. But those words sounded like a breath of life, a fresh gasp in hell, an awakening from a nearly fatal stupor. She squeezed the blue necklace around her neck, the beads rubbing against her sweaty skin, feeling their cold, familiar texture, as if it were a reset button, a portal to the end of that nightmare. "I'm close, my daughter," she thought. Her voice choked by exhaustion and contained emotion, almost there, but the desert, unforgiving in its vastness, shows no mercy to optimism. It has its own rules, its own cruelties. The first patrol appeared out of nowhere, like a white phantom tearing through the darkness, tires crunching on the sand, powerful headlights cut through the night like sharp knives, blinding tired eyes, and shouts in English echoed in the dry, dense air, piercing through Camila's haze of exhaustion, a sound of authority that spelled the end. Elias, the coyote, disappeared first with surprising agility, vanishing among the thorny bushes like a shadow, leaving the group behind. The others, in mute, desperate terror, scattered like startled cockroaches, each seeking their own individual salvation. Camila tried to run, but her legs, sore and weak, were just useless weights. They no longer obeyed her mind's command. She stumbled, her body collapsing. She fell to her knees on the cold earth, feeling the painful impact, and rolled down the side of a dune, feeling the dust and small stones scratch her skin, tearing at her clothes. When she stopped, her breath was only pain and dust, a ragged sound from exhausted, burning lungs. She heard footsteps approaching, the unmistakable crunch of heavy boots on the sand, orders shouted in a foreign language, and finally the cold, metallic click of handcuffs being fastened around her wrists, a sound that sealed her fate. But none of this, not the excruciating physical pain, not the humiliation of capture, not the bitter taste of dust in her mouth, was what destroyed Camila. What killed her inside, what shattered her soul into 1,000 tiny, unrecoverable pieces, was what came next. During detention, she was taken to a cold room, the air conditioning biting at her sweaty skin, illuminated by a white, cold light. almost surgical, that exposed every trace of her exhaustion. She smelled the strong scent of disinfectant and fear, mingled together. She tried to explain, her voice choked and her throat dry, the urgency of her situation. She tried to say that she needed to get medical help, that her daughter Valeria was waiting for her, counting the minutes, the hours, the seconds. But no one listened. Her voice seemed to get lost in the emptiness of the room, as if it didn't exist. An agent looked her up and down with cold contempt, as if she were just a number, a statistic, an insignificant figure. Another typed with mechanical detachment, without even looking up from the keyboard, indifferent to the anguish etched on every feature of Camila's face, to the palpable pain emanating from her. After hours that stretched like centuries, a time that felt warped and shapeless, a tired-looking woman with deep circles under her eyes and a clipboard in her hands entered the room. "Camila Reyes?" she asked, her voice monotone, without inflection. "It's me. Please, my daughter. She..." Camila tried, her voice failing, hope flickering on and off like a weak flame. The agent interrupted her bluntly with cruel efficiency. "We received a call from Mexico. The number was among your belongings." The floor dropped out from under Camila. Time froze, still, merciless. The air became dense and heavy, impossible to breathe. Camila squeezed the blue necklace so hard her fingers turned white, circulation cut off, feeling the hardness of the beads against her palm. "My daughter! What happened? Tell me, please!" The plea tore through the air, a desperate cry from her soul. The woman hesitated. Her gaze flickered away for an instant, a remnant of hesitation in her professional demeanor. She took a deep breath, as if bracing herself to deliver the final blow. "I'm sorry. The girl, she passed away last night. Acute respiratory failure. The neighbor reported trying to get help, but it was too late." Camila heard nothing else. The words dissolved into static. The sound transformed into a high-pitched, deafening whistle that filled her head. The air became a punch to the chest, crushing her lungs. The room distorted, the walls spinning in a shapeless vortex, the white light flickering. Her knees gave out and she fell, her body uncontrollable, as if the news had ripped the very spine from her structure. She tried to scream, a scream born from the depths of her soul, from the most primitive pain, but no sound escaped. It stayed trapped in her throat, like a silent nightmare she couldn't expel, a sound no one could hear. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. The blue necklace, once a comfort, now felt like hot iron burning her skin, an indelible mark of her broken promise, a physical and emotional scar. She tried to scream again and again, but all that came out was a mute sob, a choked sound from a pain that no longer fit inside her body, a pain so vast it seemed to fill the universe, crushing her. A nurse tried to hold her, her touches gentle, but Camila thrashed with a wild strength, driven by a pure, desperate energy. She wanted to vanish, to evaporate, to disappear into thin air. She wanted to go back in time, to retrace every step, every choice. She wanted to die right there, on that cold, indifferent floor, for the pain to cease. How could a mother bear the crushing truth that while she crawled through the desert, facing the most extreme dangers, her daughter died alone? That the song she sang to give courage didn't arrive in time? That her last promise, "I'll be back," had turned into the cruelest of lies? Camila was taken to a cell. There the floor was hard and cold, the dampness seeping into her bones. The ceiling, indifferent and distant, seemed to close in on her. And time stopped, static, without mercy, each second an eternity of torment. The smell of mold and disinfectant mixed with the scent of her own hopelessness. For hours that stretched into eternity, she didn't move, she didn't eat, she no longer cried. Her tears had dried, carried away by a pain so profound, it dried up the very source of emotion, leaving only an arid emptiness inside her. She just stared at her own dirty hands, with broken nails and rough, cracked skin, as if trying to understand what she was still doing there, in that inert body, in that meaningless life. And there she remained, a mother without a daughter, a broken promise, a woman shattered by her own love. If the pain of this loss resonated with you, if a lump formed in your throat, leave a heart or a prayer emoji in the comments. Your empathy is a virtual hug for those who face or have faced such pain. Show them they are not alone. It's unknown how much time passed until Camila Reyes could walk again, alone, free from the weight of her backpack or the desperation of escape. The days blurred into a fog of grief and emptiness. The deportation happened without ceremony, without emotion, just a signed paper, a cold pen, and a bus with barred windows filled with empty stairs. No one there openly wept anymore. No one there was whole enough to do so. Their tears had dried inside them. Stepping back onto Mexican soil, feeling the familiar earth beneath her worn shoes, there was no one waiting for her. Valeria's hug, the warmth of her skin, it was all gone. Valeria was buried just a few miles away, under the very ground Camila now touched. Yet Camila felt her daughter remained more distant than ever. What separated them now wasn't an arid desert, nor a tall fence, nor geographical distance. It was death, and the deafening silence of a life gone, a melody forever interrupted. It was an insurmountable abyss that separated her from the love of her life. She spent weeks wandering, sleeping in makeshift shelters, each night a testament to the lack of a home, the absence of purpose. She didn't want to, couldn't go back to the house where she lived with her daughter, where every object, every shadow, every corner exuded Valeria's presence. She couldn't bear to look at the little lilac room, with drawings still taped to the wall, the childish scribbles, nor to smell the faint, lingering scent of childhood on the pillow, a smell that suffocated her with memory. Every object would be a spear through her chest, a cruel reminder of what she had lost, of the future stolen. But something inside her, something that hurt more than anything, an open wound that wouldn't heal, told her that it couldn't end like this, in empty surrender, in complete annihilation. So she went back. With slow, uncertain steps, like someone treading on eggshells, she opened the door to that past, as one enters a forgotten memory, with almost sacred reverence. The air was the same, the scent of home, of old dust, the house, frozen in time, a capsule of what had been waiting for her. On Valeria's bed, untouched, a relic of a life that no longer existed, lay the girl's drawing book. Camila held it with trembling hands, feeling the texture of the paper and the weight of what it represented, and for the first time since the desert had swallowed her, she truly wept. But these were no longer tears of blind despair, of paralyzing anguish. They were tears of grief, of a deep, healing pain that was finally beginning to emerge, finding a way out, washing her soul. Tears that carried the memory of a love so great that its loss seemed unbearable, but also the strength of her own resilience. With each page she turned in the notebook, each scribble, each colorful drawing, Camila murmured softly, as if her daughter could hear her somewhere distant, beyond the veil of death. "I'm sorry, daughter. Mommy tried. Oh, how Mommy tried. Forgive your mommy." In the days that followed, a new need was born in her chest, an urgency that filled the void. She began to write. She didn't know why. She wasn't a writer. But she felt an uncontrollable urge to talk to Valeria, to record everything, to not let the memory get lost in silence. She wrote long letters on pages that would never be sent, destined only for the eyes of her soul, for her own mourning. In each one, she recounted a piece of the journey, the physical pains, the exhausted body, the mistakes she felt she had made, the promises she'd kept, the memories that haunted her and those that comforted her, the desperation that drove her, and above all, love, the love that gave rise to everything, and that, paradoxically, had broken her but which now began to rebuild her. She wrote to remind herself that it was out of love that she did what she did, and that even shattered into 1,000 pieces, feeling the invisible scar on her soul, she could still, somehow, transform that overwhelming pain into care for others, into a purpose that would give meaning to her own survival. Little by little, with a renewed and quiet courage, Camila began to visit the shelter where she had stayed upon her return. There, she found other mothers, some in despair, trying to leave, dreaming of the other side, of the mirage of a better life. Others, newly arrived, with the same look of loss, the same invisible scar she carried, the same exhaustion etched on their faces. Camila didn't offer ready-made, empty advice. She didn't tell them what was right or wrong, for she herself had lived through the ambiguity. But she told her story, her raw truth, unfiltered, the stark reality of her crossing. If someone had told me the price was this, that the gamble was life itself, the soul, maybe I would have chosen another path, she would say, her voice choked with emotion, yet firm, a testimony that echoed in the room. She showed the mothers the blue necklace, and she said that every step she took in the desert was for it, for that silent promise, for that unconditional love. But that today, she understood, with the bitter wisdom of experience, that love, no matter how pure, should not cost one's soul, should not destroy the life of the one you want to save, that there was a limit to sacrifice. Over time, her testimony became sought after. Churches, NGOs, undecided families, journalists seeking a human story. Everyone wanted to hear the woman who had returned from the abyss. Camila didn't see herself as an activist, nor a hero, much less an inspiration. She was just a woman marked by a choice, a point of no return, a survivor carrying deep scars. But her words, her meaningful silence, and her never-sent letters began to prevent others from crossing the same abyss blindly, warning them about the real dangers, the invisible cost of that journey. In the last entry of her diary, with handwriting that had become firmer over time, she wrote, the words echoing the journey of a life. I lost my daughter trying to save her. I lost my peace trying to secure her future. But today I help other mothers not to lose everything. This doesn't bring me solace, but it gives me purpose. And sometimes that's all that's left. Today, she walks with slow yet firm steps, aware of the ground beneath her feet, the air in her lungs. She wears the blue necklace around her neck, a constant reminder of a love that transcends pain and death, a thread connecting her to the past and propelling her into the future. And when someone asks about her story, she simply replies, her gaze deep and resilient, imbued with a wisdom that life had imposed upon her. I went to hell for love, and I came back with a warning. Your voice and empathy are essential, and for more stories like this to reach hearts, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Together, we give voice to what needs to be heard.